It's Tim Albright with AVNation celebrating Black History Month, talking about the stories of Black individuals in the AV industry. With me today is my buddy Rob Rasberry from Drexel University. Welcome, sir.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me.
And if you don't know, Rob is a regular on another one of our programs called EdTech with our buddy Bill O'Donnell. You can check him out every month talking about AV in higher ed spaces. But this time, we're talking about you, quite frankly. We're talking about you, Rob. And first and foremost, Drexel is a pretty significant college there in Philadelphia. And, you know, let's talk for a second about how you kind of got into AV. Right. And I always find that interesting how people ended up in the AV industry because there's not exactly a direct path. But also, you know, kind of how you ended up at Drexel.
So it is an interesting path. I graduated from Syracuse University with a degree in communications. So my focus was television, radio, and film production. And in my youthful days, I will say, you know, it was about getting into film and getting into TV. And actually, upon graduation, I worked a couple years as a network cameraman for a ABC affiliate in Albany, New York. And then it was a very interesting journey because actually I was hired as a camera person for a specific program called A World of Difference, which was an anti-prejudice public affairs campaign that lasted 2 years. So that was very interesting and got to meet a lot of interesting people, including Harry Belafonte and a couple other individuals. And then the contract ended, and I was looking around for employment, didn't really find any kind of successful stuff either on either coast, really. And was hired in, I guess I would say, sort of the 80s into the interesting world of cable television. And initially it was local origination, but during that time, a very interesting thing happened where ad insertion and local commercials became a big thing. So you'd have a big game on or CNN and you'd have all these national commercials, and all of a sudden a local commercial for a restaurant or some local business would pop in. And that was a commercial production that I worked on. So I was a producer, videographer for that, did that for a number of years. And that was actually in South Jersey through the iteration of TKR and AT&T Cable. But what happened is in the 90s, Comcast had come in and acquired a lot of the cable systems in the area, and they had phased out basically my department because they basically already handled that kind of production. So I ended up being a contractor for an interesting company called Focus Vision. And what Focus Vision does is sort of market research, but they were one of the first ones really to utilize video conferencing as a means for market research. So you would have the creative team in Los Angeles, you'd have the marketing team in, say, Chicago, and they would do an interview in Philadelphia. A lot of it was pharmaceuticals. One of the interesting stories that I have, though, is even though pharmaceuticals were part of the big one, actually the Jimmy Kimmel people had done a market research interview with a bunch of people in Philadelphia when his ratings were actually going down when he first started out. And it was interesting to know that a year or so after that, and I can't take full responsibility for this, but due to the market research, yeah, go ahead, his ratings turned around. So, you know, when you suddenly see things change, there's usually people behind the scenes that are doing research to find out, okay, what did we like about Jimmy? What do we need to change? What don't we like? And anyway, you know, it went on a great run there. So, but, you know, I had gotten married and had gotten children. And so the financial responsibility was really becoming bigger and bigger. And so I had looked around, and it was, I had seen an ad at Drexel, and they were looking for what is called a video conferencing consultant, which I was very good at, video conferencing. So I went in and interviewed for it, and I was hired. And that was way back in the early 2000s. And it's been an interesting journey since then, because it was sort of at that time that the higher ed AV infrastructure was sort of looking for people who, at least at Drexel, had a combination of audiovisual skills at that time. Also the video conference stuff, but also a little bit of video production background, which I had.
Yeah.
And my mentor was at that time was John Morris, who was very forward thinking and had come up with a couple interesting technologies and things that really helped the higher ed space. And Mike Sherman, who was also at that time one of the directors, and started to build. When I was hired there was only one other person with me. And then things sort of changed. Drexel sort of dabbled in the West Coast and the Sacramento campus at the time, and John had gone out there to handle that. And when he had left, they moved me into a different position, sort of a semi-management position. And at that time, we did a lot of distance learning, as far as video conferencing from
Yeah.
Sacramento, California to Philadelphia. And it became quite a big thing. So it was, and that was really, I'm going to say, early on in the game, early on in the industry. We were doing distance learning with the Polycoms. And when they started to come out with the 9000 series and the HD version, we were, we jumped on that and had some interesting challenges there. So really, I guess when you look at it, it was, I had this video production background and sort of evolved with the video conferencing and the contract work, and then saw an opportunity in the higher ed space. And when I came in and took a look at what was going on, I said, this looks like a pretty good place for me to be, and where I can use my skills. And because I mean, face it, initially people, when you look back in the 80s and 70s and they look at AV, they say, oh, you're pushing a cart with a VHS deck into a room and letting the instructor look at it. It was not like that at all. Drexel was very forward thinking about a lot of the stuff that they were doing. The technology interested me. And so I got hooked, and I've been here ever since, going on my 15th year.
Good night. That's awesome though. That's awesome. And it sounds like, kind of AV chose you, because it was kind of that right combination of your skill set and what they were looking for. And you were right on the cusp of, IT coming into the mix, especially when it comes to the video conferencing, because you were already familiar with the ISDN line version of video conferencing, and that was kind of that time when we were going from ISDN over to the network based ones. So yeah, that is kind of interesting. Talk for a second about whether that was the video conferencing research folks, or your time at Drexel, or even before then. One of the things that we've learned, or that I've learned at least through this process, is everybody has different challenges and everybody has different hurdles when it comes to the industry and when it comes to work in general. But being a Black man, being a person of color in higher ed, being a person of color in broadcasting has its own set of challenges. So what sort of hurdles did you face, and how did you overcome them?
So I think, Tim, you're going to find this interesting, because I think I was sort of prepared for this early on in my life. My dad was a minister, and I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and which is predominantly white, and pretty much rural, except for the university that was Syracuse University there. And my mom had worked for Syracuse University. So while I was blessed with being introduced into the higher ed environment, which is more progressive than the average public, where I went to school, I had certain challenges. And as a person of color, it was somewhat difficult in certain situations. The name calling was there, the being left out of certain things was there. But my mother and father pretty much said, be proud of who you are and your skills. build upon that, and be strong, keep pressing forward, and never back down. And a lot of that I took to heart. And as I got through the high school and the college situation, to be honest, Tim, I never really let it get to me unless there was something that was a personal attack or something that was just overtly out there. And my philosophy has always been, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it the best that I can. And I guess in a way, I guess maybe I was maybe a little more fortunate than a lot of other people in the AV industry. I think maybe my tunnel vision may have helped me with that. And I had to work extra hard. There's no doubt about it. As a minority, you had to work extra hard to sort of prove yourself. But so, as example, and this is not to say that anything is happening at Drexel. It wasn't, but I worked extra hours to climb that ladder, and I worked extra hard. And Drexel has always been recognized that, and I've always appreciated that. As far as stories that I've run into, prior to being at Drexel, um, it really wasn't as much as I think other people have challenged, because I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of where I grew up. I'm proud of how I grew up. I've always looked to, role models like Martin Luther King, and just understood that this is who I am and this is what I need to be. And I shouldn't be ashamed or disheartened by it, and understood that, people will take bias to you because of the color of your skin, even because of your religion. And you just have to stand up and keep moving forward. And in that arena, it just worked out very well. And maybe in a way, I was blessed to be in some of the right places at some of the right times. But I can't say that I've seen it overtly. And when other people have gotten other positions, or you've applied for a job, and you have better qualification than some of your peers that you've seen that have applied for it, and then someone else gets the position, it sort of makes you raise your eyebrow. But you have to just really keep pushing forward and moving on, and moving through it. And I've always encouraged that. And one of the best things that is great to talk about is with Avixa, formerly Infocom, and their diversity group, and going to various conventions and networking with fellow minorities has been amazing.
How important is it to see people who look like you in the industry that you're in? And I want to say this again, because um, I have a personal belief on this, but again, and I've said this almost every single one of these interviews. I understand where I am. I understand who I am. Right. So I have a unique. I don't have a unique. I have my own perception, but I want to hear your answer, and then I want to get kind of give you mine. How important is it to see other African Americans, other people of color in the industry?
I think it's very important, because when you hope at least that things are on a semi-level playing field, and when you see another person, another brother or sister, it's a wonderful thing. It really is fantastic. There is, and I'm not going to lie, there is an added level of camaraderie, a sort of a higher energy of feeling proud. You can identify, but you do feel that. And I think it is important, because in a diverse environment, that's what you want to see. You want to see people from different races, different creeds, different colors, all working together for doing the best that they can. But yeah, I feel especially proud, and I think it is important, because we have amazing gifts, and there are plenty of people who are more than qualified, have fantastic talents, have overcome, obstacles from, facing possible racism and favoritism. And so it is important because there's many incredibly talented people out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And my take is that representation, period, end of sentence, is important, right?
Very. Yes.
And having folks, not just that look like me, but look like you and look like Charmaine and look like my buddy Frank Patakala, that having a diverse workforce and including those folks in at the table in those decisions, regardless of what that table's doing, whether that's the design or the programmers or their end users, I think is important. So as we wrap up here, I want to ask a question, and this came to us from our buddy Charmaine, and when you're faced with a challenge, and specifically racism, and whether that's overt or it's subversive racism, there is a challenge there, and you have a choice at that moment in time. Rob, you can choose to face it, right, and overcome it like you did, or you can choose not to. You can choose to go left instead of straight. When you face some of those challenges, whether it was early on in life or throughout your career, why did you choose to face them and overcome them as opposed to you going a different direction?
So I guess we'll go back to let's take a look at Martin Luther King as an example, who preached, peace, brotherhood, and ultimately laid his life down for civil rights. And there are many others who believed so much in the cause for equality that they gave their lives. And that's the ultimate sacrifice. And when you recognize that kind of conviction, I guess is the best word to say it, and you experience it, early on, you get I'm trying to say, what is the best way to say this? It puts conviction in you, and to make you understand that there's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be people who are going to be biased against you, and you just have to keep fighting and not let that drag you down. When I was growing up, I had health problems, and I'm going to say on top of being a minority, and it just was in me just to be a fighter and to keep going and to understand that I have to be the best that I can be and be proud of who I am and my heritage and just keep pressing forward. So I've always sort of had a bit of a fighter attitude and a not give up attitude. And it just makes you want to overcome those obstacles even more.
That'll be a good place to stop. Rob Rasberry from Drexel, sir, thank you so much for your time. How do people get a hold of you or connect with you at Drexel if they're so inclined?
So basically, LinkedIn is really the best way under my name, Rob Rasberry. You can hit me up. I'll give you my email, rer37@drexel.edu, if you have any questions or anything you want to reach out to me for.
One of the most interesting email addresses I have in my address book, just for the record. Rob Rasberry from Drexel University. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You will find other interviews like this, as well as our 2 weekly programs. AV Week looks at the commercial side of the industry, and Resi Week looks at the residential side. And I also mentioned the one that Rob is on a monthly basis. EdTech looks at the higher ed space on a monthly basis. So all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.